many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. Stick with me while I deal with a couple technical issues here. I'm getting this window to close here. Mainly my whole browser. Okay, I think we got it now. Okay. One thing, the other day, I'm eating at a restaurant, and just happened to be across the street. It was either a Walgreens or CVS, one of the two. But the thing I was noticing about all the advertisement, and I know that you're probably seeing this in your area with your pharmacies around town. Whooping cough vaccine, measles, everything possible basically. There's a sign for every vaccine, free vaccines. It's just a bombardment of advertising, especially for free vaccines. And you're going, hold on here. Why did it go from you having to, go to your doctor to get a vaccine, paying for your vaccine, to the point where everybody can give out these vaccines for free? When you think about a free market, well, a free market would say that something that is valuable to people would cost a little bit of money. Things that are not so detrimental to your health or, living. Things like maybe a TV. You don't need a TV to live, therefore, maybe that wouldn't be as valuable as health options, which people go, well, can't believe that you would say something like that. Well, it's the truth. If you look at a free market, where would you rather spend, your resources, your health or other things? And that's another thing that gets into society, that we in a way go, well, we shouldn't have to spend our money on our health. We should be able to spend that money on goodies. Well, that comes after your health. If you're sick and you have to go to the hospital, you're not exactly thinking about, well, did that new phone drop? I want to go buy that new phone. Or that new TV come out yet? That new game? No, you're thinking about, I want to get healthy. That way I can enjoy those things. But back to the vaccine thing, and with our children, it seems that, well, they can't get rid of this stuff. Therefore, it's free everywhere. And then we have the CDC basically omitting vaccine data. And I got one clip here from Next News Network, and then I'm going to get into some articles to talk about this. And then we'll open up the phone lines, so if you want to call in and maybe tell us about maybe your experience with getting vaccines or trying to get your children into school without vaccines, and anything to do with the vaccines that might relate to this. But let's go ahead and play this clip from Next News Network about the CDC responds and admits to omitting vaccine data. And here we go.
We told you recently about a new whistleblower inside the CDC. Now we know his name, Dr. William Thompson. And Dr. Thompson shared his story with Dr. Brian Hooker. Thompson says he stayed quiet for over 10 years after finding a link between vaccines in young black children and autism. Thompson says the CDC knew about this link and purposely manipulated the evidence by removing black babies without birth certificates from the study to justify their own multi-billion-dollar vaccination operation. Belcy Gonzalez, the senior public affairs specialist for the CDC, responded to our inquiry, admitting the omission of the data based on the children's birth certificates. And here is the statement, quote, "Access to the information on the birth certificates allowed researchers to assess more complete information on race as well as other important characteristics, including possible risk factors for autism, such as the child's birth weight, mother's age, and education. This information was not available for the children without birth certificates. Hence, the CDC study did not present data by race on black, white, or other race children from the whole study sample. It presented the results on black and white other race children from the group with birth certificates." Now, that's a pretty telling statement, worded very carefully, but a clear admission that the CDC did not present data because the children without birth certificates lacked metadata on the risk factors, including race. Today, the CDC still claims the MMR vaccine does not increase the risk of autism. And today, we welcome Dr. Brian Hooker to the program to talk about his recent conversations.
Give me a second. Having some issues here. I don't understand what's going on.
With the CDC whistleblower, Dr. William Thompson, and of course, the CDC response. Dr. Hooker, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure.
Doctor, before we get into the details of Dr. Thompson and his revelations and your research, what is your reaction to the CDC's response?
Actually, the CDC's response is false. They claim that the original data only have the race component for those individuals where they have valid state of Georgia birth certificates. But that's not true. I was able to get the CDC's official statement yesterday. They just came out with this official statement yesterday. And I went back and I have the original data sets. I got them through proper channels from the CDC. And race information is documented for everybody in the study. It's not just documented for those that have valid birth certificates, but what they were able to do for, the entire population that was considered in the study, some 2,500 children, they were able to identify race through school records. So what they're saying is a lie. It is false that you need a birth certificate in order to determine the race of an individual. It was in their school records.
Now, do you agree that the statement itself does admit, the CDC is admitting that they didn't present the data?
That's correct. That's correct. But as the story goes, and I have the original study protocol, the CDC's final agreed upon study protocol came out for this particular study on September 5th, 2001. And in that particular protocol, they said that they would consider race among the entire population. They call race a covariate, and that's just a term that's used in statistics for a secondary variable. But they said that race would be used within the entire population. So what they've done is they've deviated from their own protocol. And according to the whistleblower, the reason why they deviated from that agreed upon protocol was they saw this astronomical risk in African Americans, and when they saw that astronomical risk, they looked for any way that they could bury that risk, and they reduced the sample size down to what's called the birth certificate cohort, and that caused the association to no longer be statistically significant. So, that's the rest of the story.
So why are they burying the results?
The CDC is scared. And this is a dynamite result, and it shows that there is a problem with the MMR vaccine and perhaps the entire vaccination schedule that is specific to African Americans. When I did my study, I went one step further, and I looked at African American males only and saw that the risks only increased when I looked at males versus females. So CDC, they are not going to say anything to the public that would damage the reputation of the MMR vaccine. They just flat out refuse to do it. They will not come out and say that there's an adverse effect linked to the MMR vaccine. So they were scrambling to figure out any way that they could do, or any way that they could indemnify the MMR vaccine, and this is the statistical method that they used.
Now, this whole story is blowing up. It's been, 12, 13 years since the study has been released. Why now?
Why now?
Why is this information now being released to the public?
The CDC did not make these data available to anybody in the public until January of 2014. So these data sets have been buried. They have not been publicly accessed. And only when I made the request to get these data sets, and through the assistance of the whistleblower on the inside, was I able to get these data. So nobody has had these raw data in order to analyze it. So this study has been sitting in the vacuum for nobody to replicate. And by the way, doing that, keeping these data away from the public is against the law. These particular data, for a government study that has the force and effect of law, they have to be made available for the public. So the CDC was breaking the law for 10 years before they finally made this information available.
Who do you think should be held accountable here?
I think that the CDC in general should be held accountable. This is an agency in extreme conflict. At the same time that they are stating that the MMR, vaccine is safe and that we want to maximize vaccine uptake. They're also in charge of vaccine safety. So there's a huge conflict of interest. The CDC buys $4 billion worth of vaccines from the vaccine industry every year to distribute to the state public health departments. And so they're the last agency that should be looking at vaccine safety. It is a huge conflict of interest. Also, the co-authors that are on this study, I would recommend to them that they withdraw their name from this study and the study be withdrawn from the journal Pediatrics. That's Dr. Frank DiStefano. He's the current head of the Immunization Safety Office at the CDC. Dr. Marsha-Lynn Juergen-Alsop, who is the chief of the Developmental Disabilities Branch at the CDC, and then Dr. Colleen Boyle, who actually sits right below the director of the CDC. She's the director of the National Center for Birth Defects and Developmental Disabilities. These individuals should be held accountable because this was a massive cover-up. It was agreed upon, according to the whistleblower, after they saw the data, after they saw that it was specific to African Americans, that they would cover up this information. And so they have committed fraud.
Do you believe that there is a criminal element here?
If we could have saved damage from children, then, and if we have intentionally put children in harm's way, then absolutely there's a criminal. The CDC is in charge of vaccine safety. If they've lied about vaccine safety, then they've put children in harm's way. And I think that, I am not an attorney myself. I'm a scientist. But I would dare say that, putting children in harm's way intentionally, I would say that's a crime in the United States.
So you issued a FOIA request to get this study. What spurred that request? Why did you begin looking into this?
Actually, it was the whistleblower.
So the whistleblower contacted you first?
Who contacted me first? That is. So
the whistleblower informed you that there was a study that you needed to do a FOIA request on. You sought that request. You got it. So tell me about that phone call when you got a call from the whistleblower. How that whole communication developed.
Well, it was a very interesting day, to say the least. I was sitting at my desk in my office at work, and I looked down at my cell phone, and there was a 404 area code number. Now, I don't really know anybody in Atlanta, so my impression and contention was that it was somebody from the CDC. And so I didn't pick up the phone. You have to understand that I've gotten anonymous harassing phone calls from the CDC previously from individuals who identified themselves as CDC officials. So I wasn't about to pick up the phone. So this individual did not leave a voicemail message. So I was intrigued as to who this was, and I called the individual back, got their voicemail, and lo and behold, it was Dr. Thompson. Now, I left a message for Dr. Thompson that if he, indeed wanted to talk to me, he was more than welcome to talk to me. I had talked to him initially back in 2002 and 2003 regarding these studies before the CDC essentially just put a blackout on anybody returning my calls. So it had been over 10 years since I talked to him, but I welcomed him to talk to me. And as he did, he apologized because he knew that the CDC had indeed initiated harassing phone calls, so he didn't want to scare me. And we started to talk about data, and we started to talk about information. And as trust was developed in these particular phone conversations, then Dr. Thompson started to disclose the fact that these data sets were available. This was disclosed to me in December, and that I needed to look specifically at these data sets, and he told me exactly where to look at within these data sets. After I received the data sets, it took me about 30 minutes in order to find this relationship between the MMR timing in African Americans and autism. And when I found that, I was back on the phone with Dr. Thompson, and he said, "Oh, you found the relationship. You found what we covered up." And then at that particular point, that's when this whole scenario of fraud and malfeasance started to open up. And so we've been consistently in touch on the phone for the last 9 months. And
so where's Dr. Thompson now? We received a report that he was escorted out of the CDC offices just recently. Do you have any word, or have you heard from him since?
I am in communication with Dr. Thompson only through his attorney. And but I do know that Dr. Thompson is, I'm not sure, the reports of him being escorted out of the CDC are unsubstantiated. I'm not exactly sure, where that came from. So
when you communicate with him through his lawyer, I mean, how is that, what is he disclosing through those communications?
Recently, not much. I just know that, as of late, he is going to work at the CDC. He's sitting at his desk. He's working on his projects. He's going to meetings. And so at this point, that's about all I know. And in order to protect the whistleblower, his wife and his family, I have honored that. And any type of information that I need, I have routed through his attorney.
Now, there's word of a class action lawsuit that's being developed, still an unsubstantiated report. Do you have any information on that?
I do not. I am not, I'm not participating in the class action lawsuit against the CDC. I would support those that would look at legal avenues and legal alternatives regarding the CDC. I think that there are some extreme issues now around the MMR vaccine. The whistleblower has also revealed some information regarding thimerosal, the mercury-containing preservative, in vaccines, and problems with neurological disorders and relationships that the CDC just did not really want to come out or have been downplayed. And so there are many facets. And, we have this one instance of just gross fraud and malfeasance, taking a result, not reporting that result, diluting down the results, which is scientific fraud. How are we supposed to trust any of the CDC studies around vaccine safety? This calls into question everything that they've done.
So, Doctor, what is next for you? What's next for this story? What's next for the whistleblower?
What is next for me is to continue to analyze information. There's a mountain of information that is associated with the whistleblower. There are other data sets that I've obtained from the CDC where I will be publishing the results of my reanalysis of these particular data sets. And just to continue to engage folks like yourself in the press and get the word out. Also, the whistleblower is in touch with congressional representatives, so I think that there are some things that are going to happen next regarding that. Will he go public? I don't know. I don't know if Dr. Thompson is going to make a public statement or not. Right now, there are a lot of things happening, obviously, in his life around the CDC. So, we're basically just waiting to see. But I am sitting on a mountain of information. And so as I analyze that information, then there will be more press releases, more scientific papers forthcoming.
All right, Dr. Brian Hooker, thank you for joining us on WHDT. And please communicate with us. If you have any more information, we'll have you back on to present it to our audience. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Gary. Thank you so much.
All right, that was Dr. Brian Hooker from Focus Autism Foundation. You can find out more about him and his research, focusautism.org.
Okay, that was Next News Network. And, for some of us, this might not be so completely shocking. But for others, that might have looked at this as, well, that's a conspiracy theory that, vaccines might cause autism. And, there's so much mounting evidence, I think it's really hard to put it in like a category like that. I've read things on here. Let me see if I can find it. Let me see here. Okay. I'm trying to look it up here. There was one I read. Oh, I wish I had it saved here. Here's one. Let me see what the date is, because there was one that was pretty recent. Let me. Okay. I'm not seeing it now. Here's one out of Collective Evolution. A major development in vaccine autism link exposes CDC cover-up. and a new development involving press release from Congressman Bill Passeri, who has called out the CDC, the link between autism and vaccines, take another step closer to truth. To begin, and I truly believe this is incredibly important to embrace, one of the biggest issues we have with the vaccine debate and a link to autism is a lack of level-headedness on both sides of the coin. Human ego has led us to fight each other on a very serious and real issue as opposed to coming together and figure out what the best course of action is. On one side, anti-vaxxers are calling anyone who uses a vaccine stupid, while the other side, pro-vaxxers, are calling anyone who doesn't stupid and conspiracy theorists. This has to stop, plain and simple. Cooked research. There has been a number of studies done that conclude a link between autism and vaccines, and there has been some that show no link. In this new development, we are finding out that the studies that show no link may have been fabricated by one of CDC's main individuals involved in research. As many who perform studies know, it's difficult to set up a study to get the results you are looking for. Considering the CDC has failed to answer a direct question about vaccines and autism, one that would involve a very basic study comparing vaccine rates and autism rates, one could assume quite easily that the CDC is refusing to do this research and answer these questions because the research would reveal a link right away. This kind of goes on, but there was a study that came, I don't want to say the wrong place. I really would like I wish I could find this article. Of course, it always gets buried. It's easy to find within a week or so, but then it just completely disappears. I'm not finding it now, but basically it was confirming the Amish and how many of the Amish communities don't vaccinate, and how those Amish communities showed a lack of getting autism, really. Trying to find it still. But, you know, not all Amish communities are the same. If you don't know about Amish that much, there are very diverse differences in a lot of the Amish communities. But main reason I can't find anything is probably because of this revelation about the CDC, and that's what's coming up. But I can't find it. I knew I had it somewhere, but I'm not finding it right now. But, you know, these vaccines and what they really represent, it's kind of evil when you understand who's behind it. You look at Bill Gates, which it's it's amazing how much evidence has been, proven that Bill Gates might not be the person you might want behind vaccines, because he has a very, very large interest in population control, and that's from his own mouth. And I'm going to play this clip. It's not too long of a clip. It was when Bill Gates was confronted about the link, and Melissa Melton is one that confronted him, and this was put out a year ago. This was March of 2013. So this isn't exactly new. So I'm going to play this clip. And this clip has Bill Gates in his own words talking about it. And one of the clips they play is a clip I've played before, where Bill Gates talks about, well, how do we reduce carbon emissions? What number do we have to get near zero? People. And I think that's very telling for who he is. And when you look at his family, you really start understanding it even more. But here's this clip.
On a global basis, philanthropy in the United States is the envy of other countries, because it's able to try out things, innovative and diverse things, although with a very high failure rate, with enough of a success rate to really come up with big breakthroughs.
I'm Melissa Melton reporting for the InfoWars Nightly News. Multiple overseas media outlets have reported on the fact that polio vaccines linked to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and his Gavi Alliance have on record caused nearly 48,000 children in India to suffer neurological damage and become permanently paralyzed. Most recently, over 50 African children from Chad also began convulsing after receiving a Gates Foundation-funded meningitis vaccine that specifically targets African people. Those children, some as young as 7, have also subsequently become paralyzed. Yesterday, Bill Gates appeared at a highly controlled speaking engagement to address computer science majors at his new Bill and Melinda Gates Computer Science Complex building on the University of Texas campus. I was able to purchase a ticket from a student and attend the meeting. Though no cameras or recording equipment were allowed inside the meeting, fellow reporter David Ortiz was able to capture a live stream being fed to an adjacent room. When the floor got open for questions, I decided to ask Mr. Gates a real one.
Melissa Melton with InfoWars. What do you say to critics who claim your global vaccination program is nothing more than a eugenics program?
A huge
Eugenics. Over 48,000 children in India have been paralyzed due to polio vaccines linked to your foundation.
No. I mean, nothing has saved more lives than vaccination. The key figure that we think about in terms of what we're prioritizing is the tragic death of young people. But if you go back to about the time I was born, more than 20 million kids under 5 were dying every year. Smallpox, measles, a variety of things. By 1990, even though the number of children in the world, because the population growth had gone up, that number had come down from over 20 million to about 12 million. And because of the work that the foundation has been at the center of, we now got that down from 12 million to less than 7 million. And the goal is to get it down to well under 3 million, by which time the disparity between what happens with poor children and what happens with rich children will have largely been eliminated. So, vaccines are about saving lives, improving lives. There's no better tool that mankind's ever invented for absolutely those things. And polio, the whole idea is to reduce to zero the number of kids who are being paralyzed. And it's during between now and 2018, if things go well, we expect that will become the second disease ever eradicated. Smallpox back in the 1970s, by 1979, that was certified as the very first and so far the only disease that has been eradicated. So we're pretty close on polio, but what it's about is every year having less and less kids who either die or are paralyzed. Last year was 232.
Not only did Bill Gates fail to directly answer my question, but let's review. Mr. Gates' father was a known eugenicist and the head of Planned Parenthood. He admits in this clip from a 2003 PBS interview with Bill Moyers that he likes to focus on population control.
The issue that really grabbed me as urgent were issues related to population, reproductive health.
But did you come to reproductive issues as an intellectual?
When I was growing up, my parents were always involved in various volunteer things. My dad was head of Planned Parenthood, and it was very controversial to be involved with that.
He went on to say, and maybe the most interesting thing I learned is this thing that's still surprising when I tell other people, which is that as you improve health in a society, population growth goes down. In the past, Mr. Gates has openly advocated withholding end-of-life care to the elderly and using those funds to instead hire more teachers.
And so the access that used to be available to the middle class or whatever is just rapidly going away. That's a trade-off society is making because of very, very high medical costs and a lack of willingness to say, you know, is spending $1 million on that last 3 months of life for that patient, would it be better not to lay off those 10 teachers? That's called the death panel, and you're not supposed to have that discussion.
And he's also announced that the goal of vaccines is to reduce the population by 10 to 15%.
So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, health care, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
So what does it matter if 48,000 children suffered permanent neurological damage and were paralyzed if it's in the name of philanthropy? But the problem is these vaccines have actually been shown to cause the very diseases they're supposed to prevent. Bill Gates is a billionaire technocrat obsessed with population control and the idea that vaccinating the world is doing, in his words, God's work. But who's God and at what cost? Trading lives for lives? What kind of world is that? When we devalue one human life, we devalue everyone's life. For InfoWars Nightly News, I'm Melissa Melton.
Polio, the whole idea is to reduce to zero.
Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero.
Okay, now you've heard it from his mouth, and he talks about, his father involved in Planned Parenthood, and that was very controversial. Well, the reason it was so controversial is because at that time it was eugenics that was pushed. It was about the eugenics of it, that the undesirables shouldn't be able to reproduce. They were forcibly sterilizing people at that time. The goal of Planned Parenthood was to be able to abort black babies. But we're not supposed to talk about that because, well, how he looks at it, it's about, saving people. But the problem is when he's saying it, what he's saying is saving the desirables by getting rid of the undesirables. But who's choosing who's undesirable? Of course, people that think they are better than the next person. And when you have CDC study bombshells coming out like this that are proving that statistics that they use are fabricated to justify what they're trying to push, it's just telling of what this whole thing. It's eugenics. Eugenics didn't die off. It's went underground in a way that it's infiltrated and convinced people that poisons are good for them. And that really can be seen through all aspects of society right now. Every little area of society has pushed these poisons. And, you know, I'm not someone that's saying, well, you don't have the right to live your life that way as long as you're not harming others. Of course. But I think for society to get better, we have to recognize our own flaws and get a grip on morals. It's not really the point of, are you harming someone? But don't you think a better society would come out of a society that respected themselves more? You know, I'm not much of a drinker. I'll have a drink very rarely. And I mean rarely. Like probably once a year. And it's usually one beer or a couple shots with a friend. That's basically my extent of drinking. And I don't go around, you know, doing no cocaine, crack, all. No. I really try to live my life a better way. And it comes to how I eat and how I, you know, go about my daily life. I try to improve myself, and even mentally. I question myself. I question my ideology. I question, you know, what I believe on certain areas, certain subjects, the news. I really tried to come to a conclusion of what's going to help the situation. And that's what I try to address on this broadcast is, you know, how can we do that? And it's really changing yourself and your own ideology by questioning, you know, what do you believe? And is this going to benefit me or society? You know, I might say, you know, in the drug war, but I'm not going to go out there and go, heroin's awesome, do it all the time, and then go, you know, do heroin myself. And just because I say the drug war is a invalid war, one that does more harm than good, and is making criminals rich. It's one of those things. Yes, I might say that we shouldn't have a war on drugs, that what people do with themselves is their business. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to, if, you know, someone tunes in that might be addicted to heroin, it's not, oh, you're addicted to heroin? Awesome, dude. No, it's, you know, why are you addicted to this heroin? What about it, you know, what is it supposed to be doing for you that you don't really feel like it fulfills all the way? What in your life are you hurting from? You know, you try to get down to the basics of that person. What can make your life better? What abilities are there for you to make your life better and get away from this drug? That's why politics, philosophy, the whole liberty philosophy is really important, is because society is going to continue to get beaten down the more they're restricted. When you are regulated to the point that these people can't just go out and start a business without filing for a permit here, a license here, business license here, tax codes, this, blah, blah, you know, before you know it, they're just in over their head. And all they wanted to do was start building custom furniture and selling it. And you have people that do it and do it kind of under the table, but they're constantly under threat of having everything taken away if they're discovered. It's one of those things that you basically owe someone before you're even started, which makes absolutely no sense. One, shouldn't you voluntarily engage with someone before you would have to owe them? You know, we heard of things called mafias that go around and say, where are your protection? And you're like, I don't need no protection. No, you don't understand. Where are your protection? We'll be by here every week to collect our 10%. And you're like, no, we will be here. And if you don't pay, they burn your business down or beat you up or, scare you. So, in reality, you might need their protection from themselves, because if you don't pay them, they're going to flip out and beat you up or burn your business down or kill you. You look at that same construct with government and you go, well, it's justified. We need a national defense. But then at the same time, you'll go, well, all these wars we're in are not helping our national defense. They're causing more enemies. And you're kind of being a hypocrite there. Well, we should pay taxes for national defense, even though our government is completely corrupt and is using those funds for illegitimate uses. You have to have that voluntary tax, which you don't, because if you don't pay your voluntary tax, they'll come by with guns and take your property. Sounds real voluntary to me. When you look at the whole picture, you're being extorted for your resources, your wages, your reimbursement for your labor. You are forced to fund something that you believe is corrupt, and in return you're justifying it. We have to have that flip in the way we look at it, the way we think about it. And I think many people have waken up to that. They have addressed that in their own lives. A lot of people work around it, but we still have to do something to limit the ability for these people to strike back in a violent way. Because that seems to be what it is. You in a peaceful way decide not to engage or fund a violent act on someone, and in return you have violent acts committed against you. That there sounds like a tyranny. That sounds like a ruling class over others. Which, if America's supposed to be such a free country, then why do we have that? Okay, give me a second here. Ron Paul, talking about the wars, Ron Paul put out an audio clip on voicesofliberty.com. And it's a response to NATO and their plans to put bases in East Europe to counter Russia and everything that's going on. And he addresses it as it looks like the Cold War is on. So I'm going to play this audio clip here.
The Guardian reports that, quote, NATO plans East European bases to counter Russia. Reason given is that NATO is merely responding to a new Russian military approach. Its claim is that Russia is responsible for the Ukraine crisis and NATO must prevent Russia from fomenting trouble in the Baltics. Of course, NATO's chief, Rasmussen, would never admit that a collusion of the U.S. and along with the European Union orchestrated the coup to overthrow the elected leader Yanukovych this spring which precipitated the crisis. For years now, the U.S. has pushed its efforts to place missiles in Eastern Europe. There was never enough support in the U.S. for this provocative move, and Russia was not seen as a threat. Now that Russia is exerting itself, our effort to move our empire with European help to its doorstep, it is being used to propagandize for our military involvement in the region. Russia will not take it lightly if we place missiles in Ukraine or any other country adjacent to the Russian border. No one would expect us to stand idly by if Russia put missiles in Mexico. So it looks like the Cold War is on. There is no Soviet communist aggression to blame this go around. Unfortunately, the real beneficiary of our policy, which is the same as NATO, is the military-industrial complex. If we weren't NATO and the Europeans would be more cautious with their relationship with Russia. Knowing our military might and the U.S. dollar will come to their rescue if conditions deteriorate causes them to act recklessly. Europe certainly suffers by going along with our punitive sanctions against Russia. The U.S. would be better off by staying out of this unnecessary fight. Europe then would be less anxious to engage in a trade war with Russia, which eventually could lead to a military confrontation.
So, there's his look at this, and I agree. By bolstering this trade war, you're making the tensions even tighter. If you don't want a trade war, stop sanctioning people. And that's exactly what this is. It's trade war. It's not an open market, and that's the problem with having these type of alignments with countries that now you're kind of left in the situation where you can't do business with these people because your government says that you can't, or this treaty with this other country and both agree to sanctions. And I'm not dealing in business with the government. I'm dealing in business with people. And if I decide to deal with some, furniture maker in Cuba, what should that have to do with the governments? Well, their government taxes and our government taxes. Look, we got Burger King running to Canada. I'm calling, the bluff on Obama. And, we have these wars that are just endless because we have so much bolstering of power. But we're getting to a point where a lot of other countries are getting fed up with the U.S. too, and it's not going to be good when all this comes. You are starting a Cold War right now, which could lead to another world war. We need people in all the countries to say, how about this? How about everybody just leaves each other alone? You can't send weapons, but you can send aid. But, we have, Ukraine stopping aid from Russia, but when they had to deal with Red Cross, because Red Cross was going to obtain some stuff from Russia to give aid, but it was going to be through the Red Cross that, Ukraine wanted to back out. Oh, that's Russia stuff. It's aid for people that need aid. It's being propagandized so much. It's just sad. And, I was looking at what's going on with the Obama administration, and this whole Burger King thing. And this, this is back to the whole, people taxing. Well, our government tax rate's around 35 and Canada was 15, so Burger King, of course, would like to go to Canada. There's going to be a point, if this continues, that I believe with executive order, Obama might put a halt. When that happens, you will likely see, the whole Atlas Shrugged playing out. You're going to see companies when now they can't move their money out of the country, and it's being taxed at a higher rate than it already is, 35%. Some are up to 52%, so just look at that. You're going to see them just go, I'm closing down this business. I'll burn down this company. I'm not going to let people that did not work for it get it. Here's something from the Daily Signal I just came across. The Obama administration proposal would effectively authorize some Americans seceding. In its latest assault on the U.S. Constitution, the Obama administration is proposing to recognize so-called Native Hawaiians as an Indian tribe entitled to separate and become an independent sovereign, and to reestablish a government-to-government relationship between the U.S. and the Native Hawaiian community. Such an unconstitutional action would amount to authorizing secession for certain residents of Hawaii. I'm one person that's, I believe everybody should have the right to secede. So, this right here, I wouldn't even really take too much consideration in, other than you have the constitutionalists trying to go after this. Listen, I didn't sign the Constitution. I was just born, okay? I didn't sign no contract with the government to be under their control. He's a sovereign. No, I'm just a person. I don't consider myself a sovereign citizen. I'm a person. I'm me. I'm not the U.S. I'm not white. I'm me. That's it. Down to basics, nature. I'm me. I live on this earth. That's all I know. When you look at this, the constitutionalists want to argue for the point that, well, they can secede, and there are certain people. Well, I do agree to a point. It shouldn't just be for Native Hawaiians. It should be for anybody that decides they want to secede if you're going to do it. Doesn't it have to be equally applied? If you're going to allow one person to secede, everyone should be able to. Wouldn't that be a run on the government? But it's to a point where it's kind of hilarious, where the same constitutionalists will go look at the Declaration of Independence, but we couldn't do it now. We shouldn't do it now. Why not? When your government becomes too aggressive, when your government is trying to run your life, why not? I wouldn't want to see a violent revolution. I would want to see a revolution in people's minds, that they become smart enough to, let's not vote for people that want more control. Let's vote for the people that say, let's kind of disassemble this whole big government thing, and let's start going towards freedom, liberty. Let's do this peacefully. Let's get back to state rights, and then slowly move that down to your local community and be able to, apply the non-aggression principle. It's getting sad. Give me a second here. If I can find this. Okay, here it is. Now, if you didn't think having the Fed printing money, how would you think if we gave that ability to some other mega banks? Maybe Bank of America, Goldman Sachs maybe, JP Morgan, something like that. Well, the CFR has a plan for that. This is coming out of InfoWars.
I want to open the phones up early in the broadcast. I've been getting a little bit better over the years about taking calls. I want to open the phones up in the first hour for first-time callers to cover the waterfront of what's happening in our world and the move towards a scientifically deployed, technocratic system. So I will give the number out right now for first-time callers for your questions, your comments, if you agree, if you disagree, any topic you want to raise, anything you want to bring up. All I ask when we don't screen your calls, we don't screen your calls, period. We'll say we're on a certain subject sometimes. So you need to talk about that subject, give us your take. But when it's a free-for-all, all I ask is you have a good telephone. When you hear the psh, that means we're going to you. That you talk to me like you're explaining to me what your question is. Because sometimes when we have a free-for-all, people call in and just start talking about subjects that I don't even know what they're talking about. And I know the listeners don't in most cases. I'm sure there's somebody out there that knows what they're talking about. So just be clear or I'll move to the next person. 800-259-9231. 800-259-9231. We're going to get an update from Cliven Bundy. We hadn't had him on in a few months since that crisis built up and then faded away. Shadows and a portend of what's obviously coming in the future. Why did that end differently than places like Ferguson, where he ended up having 2 additional shooting deaths by the police that in both cases appeared to be people threatening to assault them? Why did that not go haywire in this case as the feds expand their land grabbing? So he'll pop in for 30 minutes at the bottom of the next hour. We're going to have a ton of other news to cover, obviously. We're going to talk about existential envy, which the globalists use in class envy to manipulate. Max Scheller, the philosopher and proto-psychologist, exposed that, and I absolutely agree with his theorem on it to understand how establishment advertising works. So we're going to look at some of the mind control today as well. Obviously, in big news, the IMF chief has been charged with negligence over graft case. Boy, that is just classic. And it begins. The Council on Foreign Relations is calling for the mega banks, private Federal Reserve, to issue cash directly to the American people, training us to love our new government that's been our government since 1913. They're just coming out in the open now. That's coming to us from the Council on Foreign Relations.org and Zero Hedge, all up on Infowars.com. And this is done so that when they start, quote, taking people's private pensions and bank accounts to collectivize them, to protect them. That's in quotes. This has been the model in third world countries and now Europe.
Which I want to mention, there has been a lot of talk about that lately, too. it seems that a lot of this is really coming to a head.
That the giant mass of people that actually get a little piece of it, who actually get a check from the private Federal Reserve, will then say, oh yeah, take over the economy. Well, they're the folks a few years ago that sent us checks. They'll send you fiat checks that accelerate the devaluation of earning power. They've already given themselves literally hundreds of trillions of U.S. dollars, which is devalued currencies worldwide, not just ours. Now that those chickens are about to come home, they're looking at flooring the pedal with dollar devaluation and then blaming it on the bail-ins to the American people before the total bail-in guillotine economic takeover and the move towards the global digital SDR. A key bellwether, a key balloon, a key red flag has sailed. Let me just do this. I want to take a lot of calls and the wild card grab bag of any issue, any question, any comment, agree, disagree, 800-259-9231. But in this first hour, I want first-time callers. Then we'll continue with calls into the middle of the next hour. Cliven Bundy from the whole Bundy Ranch standoff. That's been over for a couple months. But is it really over? We're going to get an update with some new revelations. All that and more is coming up today. Let's first begin with just some of the headlines here that I'm going to read through. Peace President plots war on Al-Qaeda forces that were funded by NATO chemicals. This is in the BBC. This is in the Turkish daily papers. This came out, and the whole thing got shut down. So now they're back wanting to bomb Syria and having U.S. aircraft fly over with the cover of the American people.
Okay, I'm going to pause it there because I had it queued up, but I had to restart my browser right when I started the broadcast again. So I don't have it queued exactly where I wanted it. But there's been a plan to, well, if you don't like the Federal Reserve having the power, let's give it to more private banks, thinking that will help something out. It's pretty lame. It's the whole reason. I think that I think even looking at, well, if we back the dollar with gold again, no, I really think we're beyond that. It gets to a point where we need to start trading goods for goods. We need more of a barter system going. And gold and silver can be part of that. That can be part of the basis. And I don't really have a problem with that. But one thing about backing the dollar with gold is it is a step. I can admit that. It would definitely put value back in our dollar. I just don't know if we have the ability for it to happen. And that's where my big fear is. I just don't think we have the gold to do it at all. Close. Ever. But a gold-backed currency might not be too crazy of a concept in Switzerland. Swiss, out of Infowars.com, may soon back franc with gold. Says here, and this is from ETF Daily News. I'll just read it here. Switzerland yet again shows that it is the most sane nation state on earth. Later this year, on November 30th, the good people of Switzerland will finally get an opportunity to make their voices heard. The Swiss Gold Initiative can be roughly stated in 3 parts. 1, the halting of all Swiss gold sales. The repatriation of all Swiss gold that is held in foreign vaults. And resume backing the Swiss franc with gold at a minimum level of 20%. Of course, the politicians and bankers of Switzerland are squarely against the initiative as it greatly diminishes their hold on power and restricts their ability to continue to debase the franc. Fortunately, as one of the world's few remaining democracies, the Swiss people have an opportunity on November 30th to directly affect a change. For their sake and for the sake of their posterity, I pray that they choose wisely, and that's coming out of the ETF Daily News out of Infowars.com. It's something that we really should start looking into. Let's go on to some more news here. Got a interesting one here out of Fox News. Feds creating database to track hate speech on Twitter. Oh yeah, they want to go after your pocketbook, your free speech, your Second Amendment. The federal government is spending nearly $1 million to create an online database that will track misinformation and hate speech on Twitter. The National Science Foundation is financing the creation of a web service that will monitor suspicious memes and what it considers false and misleading ideas, with a major focus on political activity online. The Truthy database. Oh, they named it the Truthy. Oh, jeez. Created by researchers at Indiana University. Oh, great. It is designed to detect political smears, astroturfing misinformation, and other social pollution. The university has received $919,917 so far for the project. The project stands to benefit both the research community and the public. Significantly, the grant states our data will be made available via application programming interfaces, APIs, and included information on meme propagation networks, statistical data, and relevant users and content features. The open source platform we develop will be made publicly available and will be extensible to every more research areas as a greater preponderance of human activities and replicate online. It continues. Additionally, we will create a web service open to the public for monitoring trends, bursts, and suspicious memes. This service could mitigate the diffusion of false and misleading ideas. Ideas can always be misleading from all things. Who determines that? Detect hate speech. What is hate speech? And hate speech is still a protected speech. And subversive propaganda. Well, when propaganda comes from your main news agencies, do you really think this is going to stop MSNBC or Fox News? Probably not. And assist in the preservation of open debate. That's exactly what it prevents, an open debate, because, well, if it will mitigate misleading ideas, and detect hate speech and subversive propaganda, and assist in the preservation of it. No, it can't do that. It's not going to happen. Just another tool that the government is going to use to censor what people can get. The internet has become a tool that people have used to learn the truth and start opening their minds, and government starts becoming more corrupt and irrelevant to your life. Then this is something that they're directly getting in place to stop that. Give me a second here. Okay. this is why we really need to start creating more social networks that, at first I thought, we need more liberty type social networks, but it goes back to that being the change yourself. Well, if I truly want liberty, I want everybody to be heard. Therefore, we need networks that will allow all sides freedom to say what they want, even if it is hate speech. That's the only thing that ensures that all the ideas, all of the opinions, all of the outlooks, the philosophies are put on the table. Because in the end, I think most people want to be able to live their lives the way they choose. I think most people don't want others to force their way of living on them. And if you truly want that, and you can understand the only way to have that is not to start a divide and conquer where you start going, well, to prevent that, I'll push my ideas onto these people. Well, no. You have to allow for them to live their life the way they choose. And I think humanity prevails in that situation. Okay, on to something else. I was talking about Atlas Shrugged earlier. And I seen something here out of the Daily Bell. And it's titled The Fate of Galt's Gulch Chili, which many people understand was a libertarian community that they're trying to start out in Chile. Let's read this here. Many have wondered about the status of Galt's Gulch Chili, the libertarian community that was planned and sold in lots as a liberty oasis for those who wish to live freedom before they died. My husband and I purchased an option on 1.25 acres in July 2013. Others bought 10 or 25 acre lots, and some invested in agricultural side of the venture. Extremely savvy investors committed small fortunes. GGC has been an unexpectedly wild ride since then. Shortly after purchasing, I received an unsigned email through the web form of a site I maintain, informed me that Galt's Gulch Chili was a fraud. One reason, it lacked water rights in Chile. Purchasing surface land and water rights are two separate processes. GGC is desert terrain rather like California, and water rights are absolutely necessary for a community to be established. I responded to the email, but the message bounced back to me. I did a search on the email's IP, and it became apparent that the sender had used a anonymizer. I forwarded the email to the two joint owners of GGC, Jeff Berwick and Ken Johnson. Jeff was and is still a trusted friend. I do not know Ken. My inquiry was not hostile, but it stirred quite a reaction from Ken. They immediately recognized the source as a former employee who had threatened to tell people like me about the problem if they did not pay him hush money. The emailer was also an old movement acquaintance of mine. Fast forward through many unpleasant details, the man was paid off. GGC acquired more land and had water rights that were both attached and transferable. A GGC celebration was held in November 2013. The alleged purpose was for people to finalize the selection lots and other paperwork. No selection took place because no zoning permits had been obtained. A GGC celebration was held this April with my husband and me in attendance. Indeed, I was the opening speaker. By the way, I have made no money from the project other than the speaking fee. The alleged purpose was for people to finalize the selection of lots and other paperwork. No selection took place because those zoning permits had been obtained. Unfortunately, to most purchasers, dramatic changes had occurred behind the scenes. Through maze-like transfers of cash and authority, Jeff Berwick was shoved out of the project and Ken Johnson was in control. I've sorted out most of the obfuscating tangle, and I may soon be writing a history of the labyrinth matter. For the movement, sacrifice it to say there is basis for various lawsuits, and some are being pursued. There will be no zoning for the 1.25 acre lot or other arrangements of less than 10 acres. Lots over 10 acres are beyond my ken. GGC is an environmentally protected area, and it would take the political movement of heaven and earth to allow a community based on small lots to be officially approved. I had the opportunity to ask a question of the salesman who showed my husband and me our property. I claimed it because I fell head over heels for the most beautiful tree I've ever seen. I felt an instant connection as though the two of us were old souls, found each other. I could believe it. I could see it. Waking up each morning, having coffee under that tree, telling my plants later that day. Months later, in a Skype conference, I asked the then GGC alienated salesman, when you sold us the property, when you printed out a photo from your phone that read Wendy's tree, did you know you could not legally sell us the lot you were offering? He said, that is correct. I suppose there is some comfort in being fleeced in good company and being in the company of some of the smartest businessmen in the movement. I am not reassured. Perhaps it's because I am Irish peasant, and what reassures me is owning the land under my feet. But something reassuring is happening. For a few months now, what I call the founding fathers have been trying to purchase all rights to GGC and to reboot. It is not just a financial investment to them. They want to live in a community with like-minded people. They want the promise of freedom. I don't know if they can succeed, but I support them. And I'm not going to read the rest of that, but that was in the Daily Bell under editorials Wendy McElroy. So, you could check that out. You know, that's why maybe looking at something like the Free State Project might be, I don't know, more appealing to others. Because you know you can't go purchase property there. You don't spend a whole bunch of money and then have absolutely nothing. You at least have something. And they have great activism up there too. That's where a lot of the liberty activists kind of are flocking to. And I hope maybe we can get a community started up here in northern Indiana too. That would be great. I'm always up for things like that. Free State Project. Got an article here. I'm seeing mother suing after cops tasered her 8-year-old daughter. This sounds pretty heart-wrenching. A Native American woman in South Dakota is suing her local police department and a number of individual officers after a taser was used on her 8-year-old girl. According to the lawsuit, the young girl had a paring knife and her babysitter could not take it from her, so the babysitter called the police with the hope that they could help her get the knife from the child without hurting her. However, in many cases that we have seen across the world, the police actually make the situation worse when they arrived. The police arrived on the scene and made the decision to subdue the girl using a taser. According to the lawsuit, the force of electricity shot through her body, lifted her, and threw her against a wall. After the officers had stunned the girl into high-voltage submission, they pulled the fish hook-like taser darts from her chest, gave her emergency medical attention, bandaged the holes left by the razor-sharp hooks, and called the ambulance. Dawn Stenstrom, the girl's mother, was horrified, and soon after the incident, the entire family moved away from the town and returned to the Rosebud Sioux Tribe Reservation. She is now seeking damages from the city of Pierre, South Dakota. Its former police chief Robert Grand Prix and the 4 officers at the scene on October 4th when the incident occurred. She believes that excessive force was used on her daughter and there was no reason to use such a weapon on an 8-year-old girl. The police department said that their officers were following procedure, and the police chief claims that the officer who tased the girl could have saved her life. Quote, given the circumstances facing the officer at the time, it appears from the report that deploying a taser was the best viable way to defuse the situation. Wendy Klopner, the Hughes County State's Attorney, said in a statement after an internal investigation conducted by government agents. It was said that this was an independent investigation, but it was still carried out by people who were on the state's payroll. Stenstrom's attorney, Dana Hanna, told CNN that the police acted inappropriately and suggested that the investigation was a whitewash. 4 trained police officers surrounded a 70-pound 8-year-old Indian girl. Should have used less risky tactics, Hannah said. One distracts her, another grabs the girl's arm. That's what they should have done, Hannah said. She had a kitchen paring knife, but hadn't cut. She was a kid throwing a tantrum. They should have made an attempt to grab the kid, not use a weapon to throw her into a wall. A taser is not meant to kill, but it does kill. Many people have died after being hit by a taser by cops. It should never be used on a little child. She certainly wasn't presenting a danger to officers. What is really going to honestly do for the rest of her life as she has to interact with authority figures and law enforcement, Duffy said. What is going to be like first time she looks in the rearview mirror and a law enforcement gives her a speeding ticket? She won't shake that, he added. And many people go, well, you know, she had a knife. I'm sorry, but you're a police officer. You are taking a job that is putting yourself in a position of danger. So you go, well, I don't want to be in a position of danger, therefore I'm going to tase an 8-year-old girl is a very, very arrogant and ignorant statement, I believe. You know, these people are these big, tough people, but they have to tase an 8-year-old. What the hell is wrong with society that would back a cop going, the girl on knife, he should have to put himself in danger. Yes, he's an officer. That's what they are supposed to do. They're not supposed to say, well, I'm going to take a job that puts my life in danger, but once I get that job, I'm going to make sure I'm never in danger by driving around in a tank, tasing little girls, and using obsessive force against anything and everything. You know, we have a society of law enforcement that is no longer trusted. That is no longer just in anything they do. Not saying they were always just. We did have racism that a certain group of people were treated different. And it seems to be a classism now. And even that, at times, is not always the truth either. It doesn't always play out for the rich people. Sometimes they, because the cops and government have become their own class. You have people in power and people not in power. This is a class that's being created and it's being ramped up. And it just really surprises me every day that we're not confronting this more. That people like Glenn Beck can still go, when the cop tells you stop, you should stop. No. If you're not doing wrong, you shouldn't have to. Well, you should. I understand that, well, maybe you won't get shot if you stop. I understand that. But to address that and not address the whole situation where we have cops that just can run around stopping people, frisking people, detaining people for absolutely no reason. That's becoming acceptable and that you should have to stop or be in fear of being shot. Are we going to be a more civilized society, or are we going to remain some, society that is uncivilized to the point that we do believe that a flawed human being has the right to rule over another flawed human being? That doesn't really seem too civilized to me. And we do have open phones if you want to weigh in, 718-717-8296. 718-717-8296. Feel free to call in. It's something that, we really do need to start addressing. And we have, the media always trying to start things up. They'll tell you, trust the cops, and then when cops do something wrong, they say, be mad. Well, you told them trust the cops. That's what you get for trusting people that you know nothing about. Just because they have a badge and a gun does not make them any less flawed than the next person. And for you to say to trust flawed people, you have to be able to trust the people you know. That doesn't say you shouldn't have a certain level of respect, but then that respect has to be earned. And what are the law enforcement doing to earn the respect of the people? They're not doing anything. That is the problem. They're not acting as police officers. They're acting as instigators in situations. They're acting as people that ramp up a situation. Oh, we have a peaceful protest, so let's bring in, these stormtrooper-looking people. Oh, now there's rioting, which turns out in Ferguson was definitely an outside job. Inside job, if you want to consider the U.S. as a whole, but outside job of Ferguson. The riots and looting. It was instigated by outsiders linked to communist parties and revolutionary, and not revolutionary as in liberty revolution, more as in tyrannical revolutionaries, people that just want to enforce their ideology. We have a law enforcement community that needs to be dismantled. And I think the best way, I don't know how many times I'm going to end up saying it, but I will continue to say it as long as I believe it. And that is, if you are going to run for office, if you're going to vote for someone in office, your main person that you should be worried about is your county sheriff. If you have a city police force that is out of control, your county sheriff is someone that can put a stop to it. This is someone that relies on the people to vote for him. This is the only person you vote to have law enforcement capabilities. And he's the original peace officer. And they can, de-deputize the city force and tell them they can't operate within that county. They can kick the EPA out, IRS, FDA. You know, they have the ability to kick out these people. And yes, sometimes they might be removed from office illegally. I do believe that to be illegal for them to do that, but I've heard of it happening. What can you do? Put another person that's just like him into office. You're never going to find everything to be perfect, but I think that if liberty-minded people really focus on that county sheriff, I think that right there can spark a revolutionary change across America more towards liberty. When the law enforcement, the local community, the people there have more control of their lives, it's going to be a lot harder for the feds to come in and enforce their ways, their ideas onto you. And you know, after seeing that feds creating a database to track hate speech and all this stuff on social networks and try to censor what people see, I think it's really imperative that at your local level you start collecting all this type of information. You need to go through and, you know, put this information all in the books before the internet is truly censored. You know, go to all these websites you like, get the stories, print them out, print out the ideas, go, you know, print off books, download audio books, even put them on CD, put them on audio tape, find an old tape deck player. We need to preserve this stuff in case we can no longer do it. I think we're headed towards that if we don't start changing this country and this world around. The internet has been a successful tool up to now, and we do have a chance to keep it that way. And I think a lot of the white hat hackers out there might help ensure that. Hopefully it does. Okay. Give me a quick second here. And this one's out of AM TV, out of YouTube. This one, IMF moves chess pieces before World War III. Let's make sure. Skip this commercial here for you guys.
Hey
everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV Alternative Media Television. A story I want you to pay very close attention to is what's currently happening with the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, which is one of the most powerful, moneyed organizations, institutions in the world. Currently at the head, a pawn, Christine Lagarde, who replaced DSK, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, who was accused around the 2007-2008 period of flagrantly touching a chambermaid, maybe trying to rape a chambermaid, raping a chambermaid. Who really knows what the case was, but we know it was used as a tool to discredit him so that they could pull him from the IMF at the time during the height of the 2007-2008 crisis and put the pawn in the name of Christine Lagarde into that very, very powerful position. Now the tables have turned. In 2014, with Christine Lagarde under scrutiny right now, being pushed out and DSK'd herself with corruption charges being launched at her character. And now the board of directors likely to push her out of one of the most powerful institutions in the world. And the question we need to ask is why? Again, DSK, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, likely framed. At that period of time, Nicolas Sarkozy was then pushed into the presidency in the French elections at the time, which I believe were in 2007. Dominique Strauss-Kahn was a very serious threat to him, and it's why, likely, they embroiled him in a scandal and pushed him out of the IMF, ruined his character so that it minimized his chances of actually contending with the chosen one, Nicolas Sarkozy, at the time. Now, for those of you that know your history, Nicolas Sarkozy has also had gross corruption charges brought against him in recent years, allegedly accepting some 50 million euros from the late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, who was implicitly and indirectly murdered by the United States federal government. Of course, the United States and our politicians and bankers here in Washington arming the insurgents on the ground that overtook Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, one of the most powerful and richest men on the planet, before his murder. So I want you to pay very, very close attention to what's happening now. Christine Lagarde likely out at the IMF, and the question is why? Why has this been orchestrated? Why is she now being de-escaped at a time of great global economic turmoil and strife? Of course, we have the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa moving to establish their own versions of the IMF, their own International Monetary Fund, their own equivalent of the World Bank as they move away from the petrodollar, and we approach the global conflagration, which I believe to be the global war that we are already engaged in today. You know, people need to really see what's happening and really look at not just the structural problems fundamentally on a financial level here in the United States of America, but also the geopolitical war games that are currently taking place overseas, most specifically in the Middle East, whether or not this is Syria, this is Obama's previous attack of Libya, his soon-to-be airstrikes in not just Iraq, but now Syria, in the coming days, according to the mainstream media. All of this a part of the program, and all of this a part of, I guess, trying to maintain some kind of stability in regards to the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency, which we know, anybody that's educated in this area knows that we're moving away from that. So keep your eyes wide open. Again, the IMF essentially the world's loan shark that indebts other nations to the petrodollar, to the United States. This is exactly what's been happening with Ukraine. The IMF promising billions of dollars to the newly revolutionized Ukrainian government that has been supported by the West, because of course this creates indebtedness, and through that allows the IMF and the United States to control these countries throughout the world today. And it's all interlinked with global finance, it's all interlinked with the New World Order paradigm as it stands today. Again, the IMF, one of the most powerful moneyed organizations in the world today. And now the chess piece is moving at a time of global war. We just had news of a Gaza ceasefire. Of course, they've been fighting for 7 weeks now, and I don't really believe that there's going to be a ceasefire, but this is a time of global escalating tensions, not just in places like Gaza, but the Ukraine, and now the Syria-Iraq caliphate that has mysteriously been declared by ISIS, the new boogeyman. You see how there's always a perpetual boogeyman? If it's not Al-Qaeda, it becomes the JV team, as Obama once said, and becomes ISIS. A lot of Americans wanting to know, where did ISIS come from? How did they mysteriously rise to power just at the perfect time to be the new Satan, to be the new boogeyman that the United States needs to snuff out and use as their reason for over 100-plus airstrikes in Iraq over the weekend and counting, and soon to be airstrikes in Syria. Again, America and the government itself needs a perpetual boogeyman to justify these atrocities, to justify these wars, and it's why you're seeing Pentagon officials right now on CNN. You're seeing the president. You're also seeing smoke and mirror campaigns disguised to distract the American people. Things like the Michael Brown protests and riots in Ferguson, Missouri, all this being used to take your eye off the ball of what's really happening and occurring geopolitically. Not just with the money system, namely at the IMF with Christine Lagarde, the likely out in the coming days, but also what's happening from a war front geopolitically in the Middle East today. All this very serious, very important, and it has to do with the U.S. dollar itself in particular, the world reserve currency, and America's loss on that grip of reality that has really dominated international finance for much of the last century. I'm Christopher Green. Get this out everywhere. Make it viral, hard-hitting it in your face, and click the link below to support our sponsor. Check out our sponsor, ProPureUSA.com. That's ProPure.
Okay, I want to kind of give my outlook on exactly what's going on. And we've heard, you know, we have the euro. We have, you know, the whole block with Russia, China, a lot of South America, and we've heard of the Amero, and I think that they need to get that Amero on board. They need to secure Mexico, for one, which, with the whole border crisis, might be a little easier to do. We have American companies running to Canada, which has lower tax rate, but we also have NAFTA, so might not be too easy or too hard to do. When the IMF can have the euro and the Amero, well then maybe they could come up with what they'll call a world currency to try to battle Russia and China and maybe parts of South America. I think that's really going to be another battleground. That'll probably be the next battleground. I think they're going to have a problem with the whole Middle East trying to control that, but they definitely are trying that. You know, that's kind of a lot of people think it's a battle between Middle Eastern and Western, but I honestly think that Asia probably plays a part in that too. Not saying it does, but I'm sure that there's interest by Asian areas for that. I think if you start looking at our bases, our battlegrounds, it also shows lines of currency wars and trade wars. And I think that's what we're getting down to is they're purposely making it where if we don't go to Amero, the dollar is going to collapse anyways, and we're all going to be shit out of luck. We're all going to be shit out of luck no matter what. And creating some even more centralized, world currency that is controlled by a institution outside of our ability to influence is exactly, it's our federal government times 100, type deal. everything will be worse. It gets to a point that if we're not willing to say that we don't need, this type of a currency war, that we need to start looking at our local communities, our local interactions, and how we do it, and look at things that are decentralized, whether it be Bitcoin or gold or silver. We need to start dealing in some type of transferable means that is not influenced by government as much as possible, and we have to keep pushing for that. And I just popped up the chat room here, and it says the plan is, someone mentioned in the chat, the plan is to use the sheeple as debt slaves to finance the Chosen's revenge campaign, and that's exactly what we are right now. And when we look at the whole situation, we're debt slaves right now. You don't own anything, but you have to pay a tax on it. Let's look at property tax. You own your house, you have to constantly pay property tax. You're working for what you think is yours, but can be taken away next year. You buy a car, you have to pay some type of tax to have that on the road. Everything you do is tax to pay for something else. And the problem with it all is the only people that seem to understand it, well, I'm not going to say this, all the people that are strict constitutionalists that see all this happening, they want to go to this type of national pride type thing. Well, America needs. Well, the problem is as long as you allow others to be in control, you're going to have the same problems, whether it's a world government or a federal government or even your state and local government. We have to understand that you're giving other people control over these things, even if you're not. If you think you're not voting for someone to have control, you gave them a position of power as they see fit to do it. And when they have, like, your mayor has, well, the city chief that he appoints and the law enforcement, well, he might be able to use that for evil means. And they seem to get away with it with immunity, and even when people stand up, they seem to not ever have their voices heard. And anytime you do see it get to a point where, well, maybe they're going to cause so much outrage that they're going to have to, give in to what the people want. Federal government can step in. The state government can step in. And even though we don't want to see, violence, a lot of times we find out the violence is, one, it's egged on by what they're doing. They create anger. Then the initial spark of violence tends to be from provocateurs. Everything seems to be controlled, and the only way you can affect that is if you and the people around you that you know are willing to step up to the plate. And I really believe in the non-aggression principle. And I think the way we live our lives has a direct impact on the way other people perceive what you say. If you're not a violent person, it's a little bit easier to, say, we shouldn't use violence. But if you're a violent person and you're out there going, nonviolence, revolution, nonviolent revolution, even though I'm a violent person, it doesn't really work out, does it? This kind of plays into all the aspects of fighting for liberty. You really need to make sure you're doing things that are just for what you believe in and your cause. And I think nonviolence is an essential part in that. And when I say nonviolence, I say no aggression. You can never be the aggressor, even when you're mad. And then when that happens, when more people are aware of that, it's hard for these provocateurs to get people stirred up. Be like, I'm angry as hell. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go bust this business's window out because I'm angry at someone else. I'm not going to steal this person's property because I'm angry at someone else, because I wouldn't want that done to me. And then when you see that happening, when you see all this rioting, when you've seen all this looting, rioting in Ferguson, the peaceful protesters had a chance to do something. And that's back off. Say, we're not going to go to the streets until all the violent people are off. But while that violence was going on, they remained on the streets. They made themselves a part of that by being there. And it's sad to say, but when you look at it from a public perspective, when you see a whole bunch of people on the news, half of which are committing crime, you're automatically looped in. It's a way to make sure the perspective is true by not putting yourself in the situation that you're constantly going to be bombarded by propaganda showing you as a violent person, even though you were the peaceful protester. You have to be able to speak out about all the violence. When you go, I think the cops are being violent against people, whether it be black, white, no matter what, the citizenry. And I think these provocateurs over here are being violent. That's why I haven't taken back to the streets, because we need to do something about that too. Because it's both of the existence of the violence coming from people that claim authority and the people that claim to, we're doing this because we're mad. And someone said, you're wrong, the provocateurs go into peaceful protests. Exactly. They did. I never said they didn't. When the violent people show up, that's when the other people have to back out. This does not represent us. They have to point these people out. We know for a fact that these revolutionaries, these communist members out of Chicago, when they showed up, and they remained there for weeks, even though the peaceful protesters were going, we're not the violent ones, they are. They weren't going, these are the violent people. These people should be put in, be taken and detained. Instead, they just go, we're not violent, but we're still here. We're not violent, but we're still here. While the violent people were still there. They did nothing to eradicate the violent people out of that group. And another one, the citizens do point it out, but the media does not cover it. But they still associate by putting themselves in the same places as the violent people that they have pointed out. Again, they're not disassociating themselves enough. And that's something you have to do if you want your peaceful protests to mean something. And you can't say that it can't be done, that it won't be done. It has happened. Look at history. And it's always been more successful when it's happened. Disassociate yourself with the people that are going to cause more problems. Take care. I'll see you later.